Right, so in this view, or in this lesson, we're going to cover the side view of the skeleton. I know you're probably thinking, come on, Neil, we already done 2 hours of skeletons. When are we going to get down to the muscles? It's really important to know the skeleton, to know the bones, and the major landmarks like the iliac crest here, where it can stick out, in that front view and even in side views, when someone has, they're more thinner. It's important to know, how the bones look so you know where the landmarks are in the body. Like, oh yeah, this part sticks out. That's why there's that little notch in the body. All this knowledge is going to come into play when you learn the muscles and where they attach. Where muscles attach to will help you logically figure out things that you never learned from me. You'll be able to go, oh, the muscle's attached there. This is how the bone looks. When the arm twists this way, that muscle is going to have to twist that way. You'll be able to use that logical deduction based on that information you built up in this course. So it's really important. Don't skip the skeleton stuff. Do it, memorize it. Like I said, you don't have to like memorize how to draw this exactly from your mind, but just learn it very well. And if you want to take the time to learn how to draw the skeletal structure like this exactly from your mind, that's fantastic. It's to make your figure drawings that much better. You'll be able to draw figures even better than me. Right, so let's go ahead and get started then, and we'll do a side view of the skeleton. The first thing I want to do is I just want to kind of lay out the general landmarks of the skeleton. So let me go ahead and use a light color here. And I'm just going to pull these out. This just makes it easier for me to draw it for you, and that way I don't have to, if I go through the same process I did for the front skeleton, you kind of already know the proportions of the skeleton now. You got that memorized. If I go through that same process again over here and say, well, about this far down is this and that and the other thing, it'll just take that much longer to get through this particular part of the teaching. I don't want it to take that long. So I'm just going to kind of do some general landmarks here for the skeleton. That is some basic sizes of everything. So the jaw comes down about halfway, and like if you make this kind of oval shape, remember the head is much longer from the side view than it is from the front view. And about halfway is where the jaw begins to start on the skull. And that's where you have the vertebrae being attached to your spine. Now from the side view, the spine actually has an S curve to it. So what happens is it kind of comes forward just a little bit, then it kind of curves in like this, and then it's going to come back out again at about the hip area. And that's when it's going to kind of disappear into the hip area like this. And it's actually going to come around. Actually, let me go and redraw that. Sometimes when I get too caught up into thinking. So where it's going to end up is where this line is. That's where the end of your coccyx is, or your tailbone. And it kind of goes like this. And it kind of comes up like this. So it's going to kind of go like this. I tend to have this problem where if I'm not paying attention to what I'm drawing, I tend to draw things bigger than they need to be. And that's my weakest point when drawing is I'll be like, if I have to really focus on what I'm doing, otherwise I can easily draw things too large. The vertebrae starts out thin, and we are going to get into a little bit of detail about the vertebrae, not too much. We're not going to learn how each vertebrae is shaped and stuff, but we are going to get into a little bit of detail about the ribs because there's certain muscles that attach to ribs, and it's important to know that. And so we'll just kind of draw the ribs in some basic ways so you kind of have a general idea of the rib cage. Right, this comes down to that tailbone there. Right, so that's the general shape, and this is divided into vertebrae, little individual bones with cartilage in between them. And the spine doesn't actually have very much movement. So the spinal cord, not the spinal cord, the spinal cord actually goes, so your vertebrae from the top kind of have like a hole if you look at it from the top view, and they have these spikes coming out like this, and they kind of go like that, right? There's a spinal cord, like a kind of a spongy material that goes all the way down the inside the vertebrae. There's like a tunnel inside the vertebrae, and it's being protected inside that vertebrae, and it comes down to about here, and then it branches out to individual nerves. And that's that whole thing is where all your nervous system is. And then what these little holes, they serve a purpose. They're not just there for no reason. Your largest nerves come through these holes. So what happens is some of the little nerves branch off outside the vertebrae on little holes on the side, and they come out and do their thing and go to their places, and then a bunch of little nerves come off of that. And then you have the big nerves that come out these holes. I know in the front view we didn't draw the holes, but they're there. And the big nerves come out here, and then they go to their respective places. So just thought I'd add that for you know that those holes aren't just there for no reason. Right, so far we just have like a basic understanding here of the side view, and that's all I'm working on right now. Know that all this is going to transfer across, so the measurements stay the same. You have your collarbone, that's going to be coming here. Now, one thing to keep in mind is how far the head comes out here. You can kind of draw a line straight down, and that's about how far your rib cage will come out. And in fact, your rib cage might come out just a little bit farther than that at its peak right there. And then it's going to kind of come back down. And keep in mind, it's going to still follow into this same line here. It's still going to come, even from the side view, it's still going to come down the same amount. It's not going to come down further from the side view than it does the other views. And then this is where it really curves up like this. And it attaches to each rib attaches to the spine, to the vertebrae, to the little spikes that come out. Or kind of, actually doesn't, not to the spikes, it kind of goes, there's two different places the ribs attach to, like there's two little notches. Anyway, that's for an actual anatomy class. That's not important for drawing, so we're not going to get into that. But if you are interested in that sort of thing, definitely take an anatomy course. I just want to make sure the basic shapes are all proper, so when we come in and add the detail, it'll all be here. The proper sizes. That's the main thing I don't want. The main thing I don't want to do is draw things too large. This is the scapula. I'm just kind of putting the basic size of the scapula there. And then your hips are going to still be in the same area. Now something interesting does happen from the side view. It's almost like an illusion. So the rib, from the front view here, what happens is the ribs kind of come at an angle like this, and then they kind of start coming down and wrapping around like this. And what happens is you have this kind of indent, right, that kind of comes like this, and then it comes around like that, and comes around. And you'll be able to see that when we get into draw these individual ribs. Just know that for now that's there. And what happens is it kind of causes illusion from the side view. You can kind of see that indent from the side view, and it's right about here. It kind of goes like this. And so all this is kind of like this indent here. And so the furthest part is over here, and it actually starts coming up like this, and coming up and around from the side view. Oops, up into here like that. Just thinking I might even have to pull. No, that seems like it's pulled out far enough. If anything, only thing I might have to do is pull the face out a little bit further. And if I do, turn. No, this all looks about right. All right, so what happens is when you have the upper part of the hip bone here, from the side view, it kind of goes like this and comes down, and it really starts angling down from the side view like this a lot. It doesn't come out as far as the ribs, so keep that in mind. Then it kind of has a shape like this, and remember the bottom of it's going to be not too far down. This is the very bottom, so it's like, so I'll go ahead and draw this bottom part here. And then it's kind of go like this. So we're going to kind of throw this all in there. So the illusion that happens is it seems like there's a lot more space between the ribs and the hips from this angle, but there's really not, because the point here and the point here has the same amount of space, but because of this angle like that, it makes it look like there's more space between the ribs from the side view. So it's just an illusion. There's not actually more space there. We're going to zoom in on all this and draw it at greater detail. But for now, I'm just adding in the basic shapes. I'm going to come in here with a more fine eraser. Erase some of this here. The iliac crest right there. The iliac crest is really an important part of the spine, or the pelvis, because the pelvic bones. So just draw along with me, and erase along with me and everything when I'm just trying to get more detail in there. Just go ahead and erase with me. It'll help you learn the shapes better. All right, so that's good for now. We'll come back in and clean that up. So where the leg, the femur, is going to be attaching right in here. There's like, this is where this, remember I told you there's kind of like a little socket, and the socket is really formed more by after the skeletal structure itself doesn't have much of a socket, but after all the ligaments and stuff are there, it kind of forms a nice socket for the bone there to fit into. And so it kind of has your that part of the humerus. And remember, when things get foreshortened, if you haven't gone through my form course, it's really important. But if anything, at least go through tutorials on the subject of foreshortening. What happens is if you have, just really quickly overview, if you have two balls that are side by side like this, and the camera is here and it's viewing them, what it's going to look like from the camera's point of view is you're going to have one ball back there, and the other ball is going to come in front of it, right? And so it's overlapping like this. And so the same thing happens if this is more of a shape like how this bone is, and it kind of has a shape like this to it, then it kind of comes down to another similar shape like that, and you have the camera here, you're going to see that and that, right? So in the same way, you're going to be seeing an overlapping like this, right? And then we'll get into how the bone is going to come out that way. But we'll get into that in a second. I want to make sure that I capture all of the hip bone shape here. Sometimes it's good to draw with angles if you need to. Right, so now this is actually a part of the iliac crest, and it shows where, and there's a lot of muscles will attach along here. I just want to show that that kind of sticks out. It's like a ridge. Let's zoom in a little bit more here so I get more detail. I'm going to add the detail of the tailbone as it comes down like this, the coccyx, and I'll just kind of show the general shape it has from the side. We're not getting into like super duper detail on everything, because it's not important to memorize all that detail. That's something if you want, like for like anatomy course or something like that. But just for drawing, it's not necessary to know all those little nuances and details of everything of the bone structure. In fact, honestly, you just need to memorize the major points, like the iliac crest the iliac crest is really important to memorize. This part here, this is an important part to memorize. The joints are important to memorize. The scapula, are important to memorize because how they move and how the muscles attach to them will logically help you figure out the structure. How the collarbone is and attached to it is important to memorize. Some parts, features of the skull are important to memorize. And maybe a little bit of the rib cage in this area here is kind of important to memorize. But and then these bones here. Other than that, and obviously joints, so wrist joints as well. Other than that, there's not a lot that's important about the skeletal structure as far as all the little details go. So we're starting to flesh out this skeletal structure from the side view. One thing I want to do is when I come up here and draw and actually for now, for the lesson, we'll go ahead and call this the exercise. So just go ahead and sketch this out and do this several times, like about 5 times. I guess that's not really considered several, but do it a few times, 5 times or so. Sketch this out here just where you have this general shape memorized. So you have this kind of shape, this general shape of the spine, how it kind of comes forward and then comes like that and it has this S curve to it. And in fact, I might even push that a little bit further before it starts coming back in over there like that. The general placement of the scapula, let's just go ahead and place that in there really quick. Just kind of have a square here like this for now. We'll define it in a second. Kind of comes back like that, disappears. Kind of comes down. You have the shape that comes up and connects to the collarbone. That's above here. And we'll just kind of place that there as well. And that kind of comes down and also disappears. And like so. Remember the ribs kind of come out a little bit past, so I'm drawing my basic shape of the rib cage a little bit past the spine. Right, so the main thing you're memorizing is these basic shapes here, the basic form of the spine, the basic shape of the spine, and this here. So it's really important from the side view that you get this down because that S curve is going to really help you draw figures when you're drawing them from the side view. Right, so go ahead and memorize this, and every hip's a little different, so it doesn't have to be exactly. Some hips that might be wider like this here. That's something to consider. So it just depends on the hip. I'm gonna make mine wider like that. Okay, so for exercise, draw this 5 times, and then draw it from your memory a couple times, and then go back and verify and check it against the reference, and go back and forth like that until you feel like you have these basic shapes memorized to a decent degree. Doesn't have to be perfectly memorized. Right now we're going to zoom in for the scapula. Before we add the arm, I want to show the shape of the scapula here because I think it's important to see how exactly the scapula is shaped and how the arm attaches into it, how the humerus attaches into the scapula. So you have this kind of shape like this, and this is just the bone. This is without ligaments or anything. And we have this part that kind of comes out, up and above. And this is where it attaches to the collarbone. I'm not going to be using the medical terms all the time. I've used them before, so if you want to memorize the medical term, you can. This part comes down here. There's a little bit of a ridge here that you can see from the side view, it kind of comes over like this. This is pretty kind of a squarish shape here. It's not too, but you can see there's a thickness and a ridge that comes around here, and then you can tell that it's shade in a little bit because it's like it's a dip, it's a dent. It dents in. So it's important to memorize that dent in. That's where the socket kind of forms, and it gets even more round and more like a socket after you have the ligaments in there. Right, so that's the the shape, and then we'll draw the arm onto there. So we kind of drew this for no reason because we're just going to draw over it, but not for no reason because it's important, I think, to memorize how this kind of works. And then after you get the tissues, that come up and over here, and the ligaments and stuff like that, it develops and it forms more of a socket, and that's where we're going to fit the bone into. We'll get into that in just a bit. So you have the sternum and everything here, and from the side view, it's very thin. So you can draw it as a very thin piece here. This is where ribs attach to, and up here you have the collarbone attaches to here. So from the side view, you can tell the collarbone kind of comes up first. There's a slight angle to that it comes up to. Then it kind of comes like this and it thins out. And I don't really have the room or detail here to show you how, let's see here, how it has an under ridge to it. So if I draw this larger, let's say this is the collarbone here, and I draw it larger where it attaches, it has a thicker shape here, and it kind of comes up like this, and it kind of comes and gets thinner. What I can show is that there's a little turn over here, and you have this kind of under ridge. It kind of turns like that, would all be shaded in, so it kind of has a shape like this. That attaches over here to the scapula. So the important part to memorize is that it comes over and attaches to the scapula. We'll also look at the scapula from the top-down view separately, just if I can show kind of how it looks. I can kind of see this turn and bend up here and kind of how this looks from the top view. Just gonna kind of clean up some of these lines so it's easier to see. And I think I might have actually, I don't want any errors here, so now that I'm looking at this scapula a little bit deeper, I kind of want to bring this down at a slight more angle, not come out so far. Remember, the ribs are only going to come out to about here, and they got to be like this, and they got to be really close to the scapula. It runs almost along it, and the scapula only comes out a little bit further than that. So it has an angle about like this. Remember, the scapula also doesn't come down very far, so I might have actually brought it down a little too far. So let's go ahead and erase some of that. When it comes down to about there, it's very thin like this from this side, and it kind of curves in here. You can kind of see this a little bit, that little part curves up there. And then you can see a little bit of part right here. All right, so for the most part, that's what it's going to look like from the side view. So next, you should memorize this part here because this is pretty important. How the scapula works is going to make a big difference in how you draw the human figure. So, and when you see how the muscles attach to it, you'll know, the scapula has this big wide range of movement. Because keep in mind, the scapula is not attached to anything except this bone right here. This whole bone is free floating off the body as far as the skeletal structure goes. The only thing that holds this bone to the body, when we're only dealing with the skeleton, is the collarbone. Or if you prefer, the clavicle. So the clavicle is the only thing that's holding this bone. So it's being suspended in air. It's not touching the ribs or anything. There's space between the scapula and the ribs and everything. And I think I drew this a little too big, so hold on a second. Let's go ahead and reduce that size. Like I said, when you're zoomed in, it's really easy to draw things too big. So anyway, yeah, this whole scapula is floating off the body, and it's going to be attached by muscles, and that's what holds it in place is muscles and tendons and other tissues. And it's important to know that because that's how the scapula has such a free range. It can come way up here, come down here, it can come in, come out, and so it has this big free range of movement. And when you can see all the muscles that attach to it, and you know the movement of the scapula, then you'll go, your logic will be able to figure things out and go, well, if these muscles are pulling the scapula this way and these muscles are pulling the scapula this way, you can kind of tell how the muscles should look based on where the scapula ends up and also where the scapula would end up based on how the muscles are pulling it. So for the next exercise, I want you to draw this part here. So you've already drawn it once with me because you're drawing along with me, right? You're following along and you're actually drawing along with me. You're not just watching it. That'd be kind of pointless to just watch. And so you're drawing along with me, so you do this once. Go ahead and draw it about 5 more times and from reference, and then draw it a few times from memory, and then from reference, and you'll go back and forth a few times until you feel pretty comfortable with this area here. After that, we'll go ahead and continue on with I think we'll go down with the leg bone first, and then we'll come back up and add the humerus and stuff. Now, when I do things like make something a little too big or make something a little bit too small or don't curve something as much as I think it should be curved, the reason why I don't edit those things out is because I think there's something to be learned there. You can learn from mistakes. And so if you see that, oh, wait, he just made that mistake right there, that can help you learn from that and then go, oh, yeah, okay, so I won't make that same mistake. Or, it'll more solidify in your mind how that goes, how the bone's supposed to look. So this bone is rather thick from the side view, and it kind of comes out like this at an angle. So it doesn't come straight down. It's important to know that if you draw a straight line down, that bone doesn't come straight down. And just like from here, it doesn't come straight down. It comes in at an angle, has kind of a bend to it. And sometimes you want to push this bend more in your drawings because bones can flex a little bit. And if you put weight on it, it's good to just kind of show that bone. It shows there's more weight, more massiveness, especially if the guy is really, really heavy and has a lot of muscle. It's actually a really good technique to use to actually add the sense of weight to a massive comic character, for example. Okay, and it can be easy to draw this bone too long, so just keep the proportions in mind. And when you're looking at something, it might, like if you're looking at a skeletal reference or something like that, or even you look at my drawing, it might appear that this is longer than it is. And it's easy to kind of make that mistake and draw longer. That's why you want to make sure you go, okay, look at relative measurements so you know you don't actually draw it too long because it's an easy mistake to make. And from the side view, there's a lot we can learn about the knee. And watch this little dip that happens. This is an important thing I think, an important thing to understand about this bone shape here. It's very tiny. I might have to zoom in to draw it correctly. And then this bone, it also is not straight. It comes back at an angle like this. It has this curve here where it gets thinner. And it's going to be overlapped by the other bone. So, but first I'm going to draw this bone, then we'll draw the overlapping. You can see down there, that's where it connects to the ankle. So remember, we're dealing with the tibia and the fibula. Tibia and fibula. Sorry, those names, that's why I don't like memorizing. It's a bunch of Latin terms. Like, why don't we just call it things that make sense in English, but whatever. We like to stay old school. So let's go ahead and zoom in on this part here. There's this kind of bump here. That bump right there is important to memorize because if you feel your knee, you're going to have I should probably double check and make sure this is right, the patella. And remember it's being foreshortened from the side view. So you kind of see more of the side view of it, but you can see a little bit of it going back like that in 3D space. But it's kind of shaped like that, and it kind of comes out, and it's being attached. It's a free-floating bone. If you relax your knee, relax your leg, don't bend it, but relax your leg and pull it out straight, for your leg is straight, and relax it, you can take that bone and push it all around. It moves all around because it's just attached by tissues and ligaments and skin going over it, and that's why you can move it around like that. But when you bend your knee up this way, take this bone, hold this whole bone structure and bend up that way to where your knee is bent like this, then it becomes tight and all the ligaments and stuff are tight around it, so then it doesn't move anymore. But what I want you to memorize is this point here. This little dip is important to memorize. The reason why that dip's important to memorize is you'll note that let's kind of make sure this angle's right here. Should kind of have an angle like that to it. Is when you're drawing the leg, you're going to see, there's a couple points you're going to see that this little part, this bone comes out toward us a little bit. So if I were to kind of shade it to make it look like that, just keep in mind it kind of comes out toward us. That's important to know because you have, I'm going to draw this in red. You have one point here that sticks out, another part here that sticks out from the actual cap itself. I believe it's the patella. And then you have this part here that kind of sticks out, or rather, that's from the front view though. From the side view here, you have this other part here that sticks out. So it's kind of a triangle, and you can map this triangle if you view it from, this is from the outside of your leg, not the inside of your leg. So when you're drawing a knee, and you're drawing a leg rather, and you have this whole structure of the leg, you have your your thigh comes up and everything attaches. You have this whole knee part here, then you have the calf muscles, and they're all going to come down. And you have, these are the muscles here, maybe makes this a little bit bigger. You have that kneecap, and then you have the bone. Remember, you have this bone structure here that's shaped like that, and it comes out, in the leg. And then you have the other part that's attaching here, and it's coming down and pulling, right? What's important to know is you have this kind of knot here. You have another little knot right here, and you can have this little knot here. That's what adds that kind of dip to the leg when you view it from the side view like that, and then it kind of comes up like this, and the kneecap kind of comes up a little higher. So just generally, you can mark these points, and it'll help you when you're drawing the leg, the outside of the leg from that way. Now it's a little bit sloppy. We'll get more detail later, but I just wanted to tell you why it's important when you're memorizing the skeletal structure right now, why you're memorizing that particular portion, and why the joints are so important to memorize. Right, so next you have the fibula. I do apologize, this bone here is not the patella, it's the patella. So make sure it's not too big. It's good to zoom out. And another thing you can do too in Photoshop is kind of a neat little trick. See if I remember how to do it. I think you go to Windows, Arrange, and then go to New Window. And what this does is it creates two windows that you can view for the skeleton. And then if you pull them out, you can pull this one off as well. Then you can see two windows side by side, and you can zoom in one to, let's say, like this, and you can have this one zoomed in all the way, so you can see whether or not you're drawing it how you want it to look. And this can be very helpful. So I can go, okay, you know what? I think this kneecap right here might be a little bit big, and so I'm just going to kind of reduce it in size. You can see it here, make sure it's all matching up. And it's like, yeah, it is. And just keep in mind, it's important to memorize that. Just like the front view, most of the kneecap or the patella is with this bone here. Only a little bit of it comes down here. So it's not way down here like that. Just keep that in mind. Right, so as you draw the fibula, and I think I kind of like this view here. I might go ahead and keep this so that I can see, and you can see too. I think it might be more helpful to be able to see that, how it looks long and how it looks from zoomed in. You can see the difference it's making. Right, so this bone comes down, and I'm going to draw where it attaches to first because it kind of overlaps from the side view, that bone, and it kind of has a spear shape like this. Let's make sure it's not too big. Might be a little bit smaller than that. So even if you know the size of a bone, it's easy to make the mistake of drawing it too big. So it's something you always want to check as you're drawing anything, whether it's an arm or a leg or a bone or, an ear, whatever you're drawing, just make sure, even if you know that the actual size it's supposed to be, just check with everything else relative to everything else, especially if you're zoomed in when drawing. And that's why having this view, it's just really quickly, you don't have to zoom in and out, you can just quickly look and look. And I don't know why I didn't do this earlier, just kind of forgot about it. But it's an important thing to know. All right, so I'm just going to kind of clean up some of the sketch lines I had going for this femur bone here. Okay, so everything's looking good. So now what I want you to do is I want you to memorize, maybe I can zoom in a little bit more. No, I like to be able to see the whole thing. I want you to memorize everything we've drawn again now. So memorize all these bones here. I know it seems like I'm adding more to memorize at a time. It's because you already know these bones. It's just a slightly different view of the bones. And we're not adding much information. So that's why we can add a little bit more information at a time to memorize. And it's about the same kind of work. So go ahead and draw this a few times. The least you want to do is draw, because I know people aren't going to always do what I'm saying to do. So the least work you want to do here is to draw everything we just drawn 3 more times. So you already drawn it once with me because you're drawing along with me. Draw it 3 more times from reference. And if you want to go get like a medical book out or something, or even a photograph of a side view of a real skeleton if you can find one, draw it 3 more times, and then draw at least 1 time from memory and double check it with the reference and make sure it looks good. If it doesn't, then repeat the process until the one from memory looks pretty damn close. At least you have the basic idea. And then after you've done that, then it's time to move on, and we can just kind of drop in the feet here really quickly, the basic shape of them, because we're not getting into all the complicated bones and stuff yet of the feet. We'll handle the feet separately. We're actually going to go through the basic shape and form of the foot, since I haven't actually done a tutorial on hands and feet yet, or at least a course on it. And I figured why not just do that course along here? So we'll learn as we learn the skeletal structure of the foot, we'll actually just go through the actual course. I'm actually, as a bonus, I'm going to be adding the foot and hand course that I was anticipating to do as a separate course anyway, and just add it to this course. So this course that'll be a bonus for this course. All right, so that's the basic shape of the foot there. The other foot is going to be visible too from the side view, and it's going to be back over here, and it's going to kind of be like that. So that's about where it would fit out, and but I'm not going to draw it. I'm just going to draw this side only. Okay, so if you want to go ahead and memorize that basic shape, then you're kind of getting, you're kind of moving along with the course. I'm just checking and making sure I have it. See, I think I should stick it out a little bit further. Sometimes my thing sticks, so I want to come out about that far. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more now so I can get the details right. Again, at this point, you don't actually have to memorize the actual shape, just the general shape of the foot, and kind of comes up and it comes back down. Because like I said, we're going to be going into the foot. Right, the next thing we're going to memorize is the arm. So we'll go into the humerus, and then the ulna, and the radius. Right, so first let's just do some general measurements. The humerus is going to attach here, and it's going to be bigger than, it's going to be about the same size as this bone here, or as that socket. And I can go ahead and erase so I can see. There's going to be a little part of that bone you're going to be able to see that sticks out like that. It's still part of the humerus bone. There's notches here. The general measurement is that the bone comes down to about the same part as the rib as you see over here. It's about this bottom part, so we know that's about where it's going to end up at. And we're going to have it kind of more coming out as the natural relaxed state. And the bone just kind of comes back here rather than straight down. Just kind of erasing some of the under information as I go along. Now from this view, it doesn't quite look the same, doesn't have this big thing. Well, all we're going to be able to see is part of a little notch right here. And this is important to memorize because when you're drawing the arm from the outer angle, when you draw the arm from the outer angle, this bone structure is going to help you understand certain marks at certain points. When you know how the bones look and then how the muscles attach here, when you're drawing the arm from the outer view, whether it's bent or out straight, it's going to help you understand why there's certain landmarks you'll get finally, and it's going to snap in your brain and go, ah, that's where those landmarks come from. I want to kind of draw the general measurement coming down. So we're going to stop at about the point of the leg here, and that's where the wrist is going to be. And so the hand is going to kind of come like this. And we know the hand is going to come down about this far down or so into the, not halfway down, but a little bit less than halfway down. And so I'm just going to kind of have the fingers come down like this. They might look longer from a skeleton because they're thin, which gives the illusion they look longer. Right, like that. Remember, the one that's out toward us, the one that connects right here, is the S-curve bone. That's the radius, the one that can actually move and twist around on the other one. And from the side view, you still kind of see a little bit of that S-curve to it. So it kind of bubbles out here just a little bit. Not much, but it does bubble out a little bit right there. Then you can kind of come in here. If you see me going back and forth like this, what I'm not doing is I'm not like stroking every single time. And notice how smooth my strokes look too when I do draw like this and I don't lift my pencil. I get a nice smooth stroke, and that's different than if you were to do this, and get like that sketchy look. So, don't do like a scribbly look like that. That's not what I'm doing. The movements might look really similar to if I was scribbling, but I'm actually not scribbling. And you can see by the end results that it's not scribbly looking. Just kind of clean up that. Whenever you see a thick line like that, that's some driver problem I'm having, and I haven't figured out how to fix it yet. But then again, I haven't actually called Wacom or anything. I got a hold of them because they're just hard to get a hold of anyway. I've tried once before and I couldn't get a hold of them. Right, so you have a little ridge in there. Right, so you can see on this view over here too, everything's looking proper. Right now, this is where you can get your elbow, and this is the part why it's important to memorize this from the side view. You have the ulna bone. I'm going to double check, make sure it's not too big, okay. And it's going to kind of, at first it's going to kind of be close, but then it's going to kind of branch away from and add some wideness here. And it's going to come down, so it's going to stick out a little bit here and come like so. And I'm going to take my eraser now so I can, don't mind my text phone back there. Hopefully, people don't get annoyed by that and go, ah, how unprofessional his phone's, and I have it turned down all the way. The volume's turned down as far as it'll go. I guess I could just turn it off, turn it to vibrate or something, but hopefully, you guys don't get totally annoyed by that and go, oh, why does he have his phone? That's so unprofessional. It just shows that, hey, I'm a real person too. I have a life and I have to make sure it's not an important business call. Right, so now you have that slight space in between the bones there. And you can actually make the space a little bit less if you want to, and that's fine. I actually added a lot more space to it, so it doesn't quite match the way the hand is right now. This would be if the hand was kind of turned over this way more. And so I think for the sake of professionalism here, and accuracy. I'm just going to show the little bit of space that would actually be there from this view because it's important. The accuracy here I think is important. Kind of like this. This bone is quite thin. I hate the drivers. Don't know why they keep doing that. I want to make sure I draw the hips behind there still. Okay. Right, so that's how that bone would look there. Get little bones in here, but we'll get into that later. Okay, so for this next lesson, or the next exercise, what I want you to do is to draw these bones here. Right, so that pretty much covers the skeleton from the different views. So again, for the lesson or exercise, draw this at least 3 more times, draw this at least 3 more times. The reason why I say only 3 now is because you kind of get in the hang of what these bones look like. There's just a few little differences you have to memorize from this angle. And this right here is going to be really important later from the side view, because what happens is, let me go ahead and draw in red on another layer. You can have right, so let's start damn it, come on. No, I should be down a little bit further. As we're drawing in the muscles here, this is, you know, not the muscles individually, but this is the arm as it appears, as it has skin and everything. What's going to happen is you're going to see this kind of, you're going to have a lot of cartilage and stuff too, keep that in mind, other tissues that bulk up besides muscles. But you have cartilage and muscles and everything that come and add, but it's all connected because of this bone, and it kind of adds this elbow look here. Right, and then you have your forearm, it kind of bulges out a little bit like that because of the muscles and comes down into the hand and everything. So it's important, why it's good to memorize this part of the structure here is when we memorize how the muscles attach, you're going to have this kind of dent right here because of you have your brachialis that comes up here between the tricep and bicep, and then you have the other muscle, I forget the name of it right now, but I'll tell you when we get there. It comes around, and then there's another muscle, and what you do is you get this little ridge right here, and there's always a little shading before you get to the actual, you know, part of the elbow right there. And so you kind of get this kind of darker shade part here, and it comes around. I know it's probably kind of hard to see with all that, but you'll get this kind of that part right there. Anyway, it'll make sense when we get to the muscles and the skin and everything. So believe me, doing all these boring exercises, you might find them very boring, is very important, because when you have all this in your mind very good, it's going to really increase your figure drawing, and when we start attaching muscles and stuff, it's going to make everything that much easier to draw. And it's just so important. I can't stress how important it is. So don't skip this stuff. Right, so this lesson was shorter than the last one, and I'm going to go ahead and you know, on the layer behind it, add the white and everything. We'll come back in and we'll do a 3/4 view, because it's going to be important to attach the muscles from different angles. So we'll do a 3/4 view of the skeletal structure, and maybe even a back 3/4 view. If anything, I'll at least draw a back 3/4 view. But I think you might as well see me draw and go through it real quick. And then we'll start attaching the muscles to the skeleton and show where they attach and stuff like that. After we attach all the muscles, and we'll work with each muscle individually, we'll be like, okay, we're working with the pec muscle right now. We'll show this how the pec muscle looks from the side view, and then we'll draw this how the pec muscle looks from, sorry, this is how the pec muscle looks from the front view. This is how the pec muscle looks from the 3/4 view. You know, all the views that are applicable to it. We'll do a quick top-down view too, because that's important. And then there's certain bones I kind of want to go through like the scapula. I think before I do the 3/4 view, I kind of want to show the scapula from the top-down view. But top-down view is a view we're going to do anyway. But I want to isolate the scapula itself because I want to show you something that's really important about the scapula that I've been talking about. It's where this kind of U-turn takes shape here. But yeah, so all this information will be important. And then after we map all the muscles, all the major muscles, we're not going to map every single muscle like that you don't see and inside of the skeletal structure, like the muscles that are attached to the spinal cord and stuff like that, like all the ones you never see on the outside of the body at all. But we will go through some of them that we don't see, but it kind of makes an important, like the 3 muscles that come underneath your pectoral muscle. That's important to memorize. But we're not going to memorize all these tiny little muscles that go inside the neck that are way deep inside the skeletal structure that aren't going to make any difference to your figure drawing. Right, so we won't bore you with that kind of stuff. After we have mapped all the muscles out to the different views of the skeletal structure, then what we're going to do is we're going to start going into individual, well, actually, then we'll do the basic shading. We'll add the skin over the muscles so you can see, oh, that's why you shade the skin that way. That's why it has that dip right there because of that bone or because of where that muscle attaches, because where the fibers in that bone, and so forth. If you watch my back tutorial that I offered for free, you'll kind of get an idea what I'm talking about there. And that's all going to start clicking in your brain and you're going to have this new level of understanding. Even if you've gone through my Mastering Human Figure course, this course is going to bring your level to your understanding to a whole new level. It's going to be like, wow, it's going to bring your figures to that much more realistic level. And then we're going to deal with individual body parts and individual poses that will help strengthen what happens when the arm twists around this way, twists around that way, how these muscles twist, what happens when the shoulders are raised, when the arms raised up, when the arms are stretched back, things like that. That's going to be important to memorize as well. And we'll go through as much as that as possible. I don't want the course to be too long, but it's going to be a very extensive course and you're going to learn a lot from it. And it might take you a while to get through it, but in the end, the results will pay off and your figures will look that much better. All right, so that's it for here. Again, just for the lesson, by the time you're done with all lessons, you should be able to draw this right here from memory. So finally, as your last exercise, what I want you to do is draw this entire side figure now a few times. And then also draw the female version of it, knowing that the rib cage is a little bit smaller, a little bit thinner, hips are shaped slightly different, things like that. But definitely go through and in fact, hold on, let's go ahead and look at how the hip looks from the side view. The rib is pretty easy, just make it smaller, but the hip might be a little bit more confusing. Right, so the rib cage, of course, looks thinner. It comes in here more, it starts here more, comes out and around like that. So that's the basic shape that changes. That's easy to memorize. With the hip bone, it has a slightly different shape to it. So it's pretty much the same thing except from the side view, it kind of has more of an angle like this and comes up here. And then you have the iliac crest, which comes like this. It comes down the same way the other one does, but it's a little bit smaller here. Kind of has more of a shape like this. Kind of comes up here. Because remember that the female, the whole pelvic area, the pelvis bones, the whole hip has to be shaped to deliver children, whereas guys don't. Still, the overall shape remains pretty much the same. It's just it kind of changed a little bit, and then this is where you have your leg attaching, your humerus, or excuse me, your not humerus, your femur, sorry. As you can see, I never really cared to memorize all that crap in school. And I still don't care to memorize it. I'm only using the names for you guys, for those that might actually care about that kind of stuff. I want to be as thorough as possible. So it has a basic shape like this. So the shape is very almost the same. It just changes very little. So memorize that very basic difference, add these details to it, but that's all that happens. So, drawing the female from any angle isn't much different than the guy. So if you can memorize the guy or memorize the female, then drawing vice versa isn't much different. All right, so there you go. That's your last little bit of exercise. And again, make sure you can draw this whole figure from your mind a couple times before you move on to the next lessons or the next part. Thank you for watching.